Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Your Life Simplified. My name is Jack Giardino, and I'll be the host for today's discussion. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing what we've boiled down as the 5 tips to building wealth. Whether you're just starting out in your career, you're sending this podcast to one of your children to listen, we hope that this content will help point you in the right direction to building your financial freedom. On today's episode, I have 2 colleagues and friends of mine, Wealth Advisor Matt Charles and Associate Wealth Advisor Nolan Kiem. Guys, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks, Jack. Good to be here.
Jack.
When we think about building wealth and kind of what you all have presented as your 5 tips to building wealth, I know the 2 of you work on a team together. You're having these conversations with clients' children. Could you just kind of discuss with me real quick from a high level before we dive into those 5 tips, how you all tend to have these conversations and why you believe it's so important?
So I think it's, really important for, clients' kids to start having these conversations with us. And a lot of time they don't feel as comfortable talking to their parents or their friends about it. So it kind of offers them like a safe space to talk to us, ask questions. Because, if they're not in this industry, we find a lot of times they just don't really understand what we do. So we kind of spend, here at Mariner Wealth Advisors, a lot of time like educating them because we want to build like a good base of knowledge. And then you kind of take that into the planning aspect and starting to advise them and helping them, setting them up for more financial success down the road.
Yeah. And I think when we start getting in front of clients' kids, we can tell right away that they want this and they want to learn these things. They just don't know where to start. And a lot of times it's, either the students in college or even high school we've had some meetings with. But we want to help them just prepare for their future, whatever that looks like, whether it's as a student in college or as a young adult, starting off in their career.
Mm-hmm. And Nolan, I think that's a great point, talking about just getting started. A lot of these times, clients' kids, and even just our friends, right? You hear it all the time. They want to get started. They don't know how. If you're in your early 20s or 30s and you're listening to this podcast, the first thing and the most important thing that I could encourage you to do is just get started. Start reading financial literacy books, financial topic books, podcasts. There's so much content out there. Go to your parents' trusted advisor. Go to your parents. Hey, mom, dad, do you all work with anyone that you could introduce me to so I can ask some of these questions I've been thinking about relating to my finances? So I think, that's the overarching most important thing is just to get started. So I'm looking at this list here, Matt, and the first bullet point you all have is the 50-30-20 rule. Would you mind diving into that a little deeper?
Yeah. So I'd like to take a step back because, you have the 50-30-20 rule, but it's really this rule is about creating a spending plan. And so when you kind of start breaking it out into, the 50, the 30 and the 20, you start with the 50. So the 50 is the expenses that you live day to day. So it's, getting your groceries, if you're traveling, if you're going out, you could kind of loop that into, the basic necessities plus some entertainment and fun. And then the other bucket is going into the 30%. And this is really just focused on like your housing expense. And it doesn't mean that you have to live in a house, but it's, built around if you are buying a house, renting, if you keep all those expenses around 30% of what you make, and that includes, rent, mortgage, utilities, you're setting yourself up for financial success because you're kind of living within your own means. And then the most important part is talking about the 20%. And really, this is where we focus a lot of time with our clients' kids because it's trying to get them to understand if they can save at least 20% of what they make each year, you're already setting yourself up for financial success down the road.
Yeah, and one thing to add on that, Matt, one thing that we have seen is a lot of these kids of clients, even adult clients, they really don't understand what's coming in and what's going out. So I think this topic here really starts getting the idea across to your point, Matt, of, let's start examining where your money's at. And the 50-30-20 is just an easy way for really anybody to see, if we break it out into these 3 categories, it's very simple to understand first off, and then to start doing and start living on.
Mm-hmm. No, and I love that additional point there. And one thing I'll add is when I'm having these conversations with clients' children, or even my friends, the 2 things I really, really, really enjoy about this rule is 1, to your point, it's simple. 2, you can automate it, right? So when we think about the 50 and the 30, set up 2 checking accounts and have your pay stub or your automatic pay get split. 50% of your take home pay goes to one checking account. 30% goes to another checking account. Now you know how much you have to spend in each category. And then the 20%, which is going to lead us into our next topic, have that automated into your 401k or a high yield savings account or an individual retirement account. And I think, Nolan, you're going to touch on that, but automate that piece as well too. So that leads us into our second point of the 401k savings. What's so important about that, Nolan?
Yeah. So I think to your point, Jack, right there, I mean, that is an incredible point, because once you start building those habits early on, especially, it's so much easier as you get raises, as life starts throwing you different curveballs. It's so much easier to stay on that plan when you have this habits already in place.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to jump into the next topic, the 401k savings, really just taking even a step back on that, the 20% savings, we like to think of it in terms of 3 different savings buckets. So you have your short term, your midterm, and your long term. So to start with the short term bucket, this falls into that 20% of savings. And it can be anything from just that emergency fund in your bank, which we'll dive into a little bit deeper here in a bit. It can be, you want to start, saving up to buy a car in the next, 6 months. That could be another type of short-term savings. Then the midterm, look at more of the intermediate savings goals, whether that's, saving up for an engagement ring or saving up for, down payment on a house. All those fall into that 20% savings bucket. For me, I have a kid, so that's, education savings that falls into that 20% for our family. But then most importantly, we like to get across, just 401k savings, whether it's, you have a 401k or another type of retirement plan at work. Try to help clients and their kids understand, what options they have in those plans, what it looks like, what their employer offers for them as well. And then just start providing that general advice on how we can, help them reach their long-term goals.
And I think one thing on that, like with here at Mariner Wealth Advisors, what we do with clients' kids is we ask them to send us like their, benefits package. Because I mean, when you get a new job or you start a new job, HR sends you this big package, and you don't really, a lot of times the clients' kids don't really understand what they're reading or what to do. And so it's a great opportunity, for us to set up a meeting with them and walk them through it and kind of explain the different things in that package and kind of what to do. And I think one important thing is with the retirement plan, which is a lot of times employers offer a match to that 401k. So it's really important we try to educate clients' kids on making sure they contribute at least up to that match, because essentially that's free money on the table if they didn't do it. And so that's really important. And the other thing too that we try to do on a yearly basis is typically most people get a raise. And so we try to encourage clients each year as they get raises to, increase their percentage of what they're saving in their 401k or other retirement plan by, 1% or 2%. Because what that's doing is that's essentially taking the money that you got the raise and you're just shifting it into savings for retirement and later on in life.
Great points from both of you. And back to the top of our list, we touched 50-30-20 rule and creating that spending plan as the number one priority. We then went to our second topic of the 401k savings. And then the third topic, Nolan, you touched on it a little bit, but Matt, we have an emergency fund here. Why is that so important?
Yeah. So the emergency funds is talking about having like 3 to 6 months of expenses saved away for that rainy day. And really, like if you go back the last, 12 to 18 months when COVID hit, I mean, a lot of people didn't have this emergency fund, and they were, they could have lost their job, or, stuff could have happened that could have caused them to, stress about money and not being able to cover the bills. So we stress that having that safety net to lift you up in case something happens in your life that's unexpected, because as we all know, life events come up and unexpected happens all the time. But really building that 3 to 6 months of expenses in a savings account and leaving it there, it's just protecting you for those events that you don't know could come up.
Mm-hmm. And so Nolan, if you don't mind me asking, how do you come up with that 3 to 6 month range? What does that really mean?
Yeah, I think you guys have been throwing out the term spending plan a couple different times. And I think that in itself, we try to assist clients and clients' children in first, just developing that spending plan, knowing what's coming in, what's going out, to really understand, what is needed for you, because everyone's different. Everyone has different expenses that may come up. But I think it really does come down to, it's just that comfort level of what you like seeing in your bank account is probably the most common spot for an emergency fund. And for me, I have a set dollar amount. If, I like this X amount of money sitting in my bank account, and anything over that, I have automatically sweep over into a different account where I do invest for more of those midterm and long-term goals. And I think you guys might have something similar as well, but I think it really does come down to just what you're comfortable with, what helps you sleep at night. but really just making sure you're protected in case something does happen.
I love the rule of thumb of kind of that 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in your emergency savings. But to your point, Nolan, it is whatever makes you feel the most comfortable. Again, I love this third point here of building that emergency fund and making sure it's in place.
Thanks again for downloading this episode of Your Life Simplified, which is produced by Mariner Wealth Advisors. And at Mariner Wealth Advisors, we're here to serve as your advocate. We help people chart a course to reach their personal and financial goals so that they can have greater peace of mind that may lead to a more fulfilling life. We do this by always putting our clients first. Because as fiduciaries, we're required to provide guidance that's in the best interest of clients, not in the best interest of a company or shareholders or anyone else. So as you listen to this podcast and have questions about maybe your own financial situation, or would simply like a second opinion, or even you have an idea for a future podcast, please go ahead and email us at podcast@marinerwealthadvisors.com. If you found the information on this podcast valuable, please go ahead and share it with a friend or family member that you think might benefit from this information. And please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and now back to the episode.
So let's move on to the fourth of our 5 tips to building wealth. For this fourth tip, we're going to be discussing debt. If you've gone through college, you probably have student loan debt. If you purchased a house, you probably have a mortgage. Sometime throughout your life, most likely you're going to have some sort of debt. What's so important about debt, Matt? And how are you guiding clients' children through the conversation of debt?
Yeah. And I think a lot of clients' kids come to us with that question a lot. And I think debt frightens people. I mean, it terrifies kids. And they, think they need to pay it off really quickly and they don't want to have debt. But kind of the reality to your point that you made earlier is you're probably always going to have debt. And so I think first starting with there's good debt and there's bad debt. Bad debt, I would say, is like credit card debt. If you're going to have a credit card, you want to make sure you're paying that off every single month, because if you aren't, you're getting hit with a high interest rate. I mean, it's double digits, usually close to 20%. And so that's bad debt. But then a lot of debt is good. And so, good debt is a way, it's like a financial means to get something. So like, you take out a mortgage because you need a house and a place to live. With a car loan, you need that car to get to and from places. So you have to take out debt because a lot of people don't have that money readily available to them to just outright buy it. So you have to take on some debt. And so the idea behind debt is that, it's scary. Obviously you're having to owe somebody money. But what we talk about with clients' kids is, set up a plan with it. With your auto loan, typically you can pay it off in 6 to 7 years. So just know on a monthly basis, you're going to be required to make that payment and making sure that it fits within your 50, 30, 20 and that you can afford that. But don't get so overworked that you have all this debt, because I think, one thing that we've really focused on with clients' kids is like, yes, you can pay off that debt, but if you spend all your time and all your money focused on paying down that debt, you're really taking away from saving and things down the road, whether that's retirement or whether that's a goal that's in the next 5 to 10 years.
Matt, I think those are all great points. And you talk about the good debt and the bad debt. And I kind of want to loop this back into the emergency fund where there's not a perfect answer. I agree 100% that bad debt is credit card debt, right? We do not want to carry a credit card balance. However, if you do have some extra cash flow and it makes you feel better that you're paying down your car loan faster instead of investing it, that's perfectly okay. You got to be able to sleep at night too. So I think the important thing is just making sure that whatever debt you do have on your plate, or if you're taking out additional debt, that it's worked back into the 50, 30, 20 rule.
Yeah. And I think one thing too is, to your point, that it's different for everyone and there's emotional side to it too. So seek out an advisor or, contact somebody at Mariner Wealth Advisors to talk to somebody, because your situation could be completely different than, your best friends. So it's always good to talk about that. And that's kind of why, as advisors, we're always spending the time to get to understand the client and the situation.
Mm-hmm. And so debt is something, as we mentioned, that we're going to experience throughout our lifetime. But one of the most important things for being able to take out debt is building credit. And that's what we have as our 5th tip to building wealth, is the importance of building credit. Nolan, would you dive into this a little bit for us?
So yeah, this building credit topic is almost part 2 to the topic that we just covered in debt. And we see all sorts of different aspects to this topic because, in some cases we have a client's child come in the door that is in high school, and we want to start educating them on the aspect of debt in general. And one of those topics is building their credit. And a lot of individuals, old or young, really don't understand the aspect of, what goes into applying for a mortgage or applying for a loan, because as soon as that lender, sees you and understands your situation, they're going to pull your credit score. And if it's not in the range that they want it to be, you may get denied of that loan or of that mortgage. So we have to, really educate individuals on this aspect of, it is good to have some sort of debt, because without it, there's no way to really build up your credit score in order to get that loan. And then when we have, clients' kids come in the door that have just gone through college, maybe they already have student loans and they've already been making payments on them. So that's already helping their credit score. And maybe they don't even realize that, but we point that out and say, this is one aspect, when you need that house in your savings bucket, in 4 or 5 years, or that car loan, by you paying this student loan debt will help you in that aspect. But there's other types of, things that go into, building that credit. And we just really just try to get to the basics of, these are the things to remember. First off, make your payments on time, because that's the biggest percentage in determining your credit score.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we spend time with the kid is making sure they understand how to build credit and giving them tips. And so, sometimes it's having bills in your name, or it's starting to get your first credit card, and doing simple things like that. But it's different for everyone's situation. So again, it's always good to talk to your parents' advisor or talk to an advisor at Mariner Wealth Advisors, because they can always help down the road with building up your credit.
Yeah. And there are other tools out there too, like NerdWallet. I know we're all 3 fans of that site. You can go on there, and we have helped clients go on there and just kind of compare different credit cards that they are applying for, to see, this one has an annual fee, this one doesn't. What's the difference? This one has one benefit over the other. What do you prefer? And just kind of go through the pros and cons of all.
Those are all wonderful points. Matt, Nolan, thank you both for taking the time to join today's episode of Your Life Simplified. The 5 tips to building wealth have been extremely valuable, and I know we have a lot of great content on this episode. But real quick, I just wanted to run back through all 5 for our listeners. So first, we have the 50-30-20 rule. Remember, this is creating your spending plan. 50% goes towards your needs and wants, 30% goes to housing, and most importantly, 20% goes towards your savings and long-term investing. That led us into our conversation about 401k savings. Make sure you're contributing. Make sure some of your 20% is allocated towards retirement and building that nest egg for your long-term financial goals. Also remember, take advantage of that employer match. Free money on the table. Third, we have the emergency fund. We recommended between 3 to 6 months of expenses of cash on hand. Fourth, we discussed debt. There's good debt and there's bad debt. Make sure you understand what type of debt you're taking out and make sure that it falls back into the 50-30-20 rule. And lastly, we discussed building credit. It's extremely important to make sure that you're building a good, solid credit score. So all 5 wonderful tips to building wealth. Matt, Nolan, anything else you all would like to add?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add is, this was a lot that we covered. So talk to your parents' advisor, talk to an advisor at Mariner Wealth Advisors. We have a website out there that's marinerwealthadvisors.com. And if you have any questions, we're always happy to help.
I couldn't agree more. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to another episode of Your Life Simplified. Please share this episode with anyone that you believe would find this content valuable. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please reach out to podcast@marinerwealthadvisors.com. Thank you.
Mariner Wealth Advisors, MWA, is an SEC-registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Kansas. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. MWA is in compliance with the current notice filing requirements imposed upon registered investment advisors by those states in which MWA maintains clients. MWA may only transact business in those states in which it is notice filed or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from notice filing requirements. Any subsequent direct communication by MWA with the respective client shall be conducted by a representative that is either registered or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from registration in the state where the respective client resides. For additional information about MWA, including fees and services, please contact MWA or refer to the Investment Advisor Public Disclosure website, www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money. The views expressed in this podcast are for educational purposes only and do not take into account any individual personal, financial, legal, or tax considerations. As such, the information contained herein is not intended to be personal legal, investment, or tax advice. Nothing herein should be relied upon as such, and there is no guarantee that any claims made will come to pass. The opinions are based on information and sources of information deemed to be reliable, but Mariner Wealth Advisors does not warrant the accuracy of the information.